The Eurozone crisis has led to multiple decision points for corporate treasurers. What we are seeing with our client base is that some companies are just watching the situation. They haven't made any fundamental changes to the way they're operating. There are others who have actively looked to changing their banking structures and moving funds to safe harbors, revisiting their FX and hedging policies, and rethinking their funding policies. There's a third category of clients who are particularly concerned about some of the supply chain bottlenecks and supplier and customer issues, who are actively implementing programs to deal with those concerns. So those are really the three areas where we're seeing corporate treasuries responding. Bill, would you like to add some perspective?
In fact, I was going to add that the reason why I think treasurers are finding it so difficult to deal with the Eurozone crisis is that it's not a crisis. It's really three crises in one. They're having to worry about the integrity of and credit quality of sovereigns, and which is the first time in any finance person's life where you no longer have a riskless asset. And so all the finance models that they were learning in business school no longer apply. So fundamental analysis has to be done in assessing risk, where you don't have the easy benchmark that you had before. Right. The second crisis has to do with the banking system. Banks have become questionable in terms of their credit quality because of their holdings of sovereigns, which have tanked, and that has caused their share price to tank and caused them to have funding difficulties. And when you have a banking crisis, that causes a credit crunch and a contraction of credit in the euro area, which of course has global implications. But nevertheless, that credit crunch in the euro area worsens the sovereign debt problem because it worsens GDP. So you really have a vicious cycle developing across the main players in the financial and economic system of Europe, which are the banks and the sovereigns. And that GDP effect is really a critical one.
And Swati, there are really two other points as well around that. One is around the contingencies. Companies are really working hard to look at across the board at the contingency planning they have in case the crisis continues to exacerbate. And that's one of the fundamental themes, Bill, that we've seen with our corporate clients is how do they get ready for an unknown but a possibility. And the other piece is around liquidity, making sure that they absolutely have visibility and control over liquidity in their system across the Eurozone, which previously they may have been more fragmented in their banking structure, but today that's almost job one for most of the corporate treasurers.
Yeah.
One of the biggest challenges for a lot of companies is they need transparency across all of their functions and activities. So we are seeing a lot of demand for better visibility of where all those risks are, and then risk mitigation plans that can go in once they know where the potential areas of risk are. And these could be customer records, again, supply chain risks, liquidity risks, understanding which banks they're using across the region. So data has become far more relevant to allow them to put contingency plans in place.
But a key piece of that is really around the theme of automation and electronification of everything. People don't want manual processes where they may have certain counterparty or risks within their own supply chain. So their focus really is taking the investment they've made in ERP systems and Treasury workstations, really driving that through the commercial activities so they have total automation so things flow very smoothly and have a true end-of-day.
Yeah, and well, let me add one other thing, is that the key to risk management and risk mitigation is not just the visibility and also the optionality that automation gives you in forming your contingencies. We've had a lot of experience dealing with currency crises and banking crises. Just look at Latin America, just look at all over the world. We've had a history of these crises. So we know how these crises will unfold, but we just don't know how this crisis will unfold. Right. And by giving us more optionality using the digitization technology and a global footprint that lets you look at your resource opportunities, I think that's absolutely key in the new way in which treasurers have to approach risk management and risk mitigation.
At this year's EuroFinance, I think in my perspective, there's really three key topics. One is around liquidity management. I think also supply chain management, the need to have control over your supply chain, to be able to ensure stability within your supply chain, and how do you effect tools that can help you manage that? Because at the end of the day, the Treasury and Finance team's job is to help support the commercial activities so that they can support their customers, so they can create sustainable revenue growth within their own company. And number three, from my perspective, is really around the regulatory impact of what's happening in the markets today and how they're going to address these and how we can partner together with our clients to ensure that they're meeting their requirements internally and externally.
A couple of things I would add on the key themes at EuroFinance. I think for the corporate sector, many are going through a level of growth despite the challenging times. And I think some of the themes will be around how they sustain that level of growth, how they tackle competition, and how they deal with some of the risk management issues that are creeping in. I also think, given that we are in Euroland and Eurozone is very topical right now, there will be many conversations around how that impacts corporate treasuries and how they can offset some of the risks against some of the growth that they'll continue to see in the emerging markets. I'm confident that there will be a lot of conversations around Asia, around Africa, around, again, the theme of the emerging markets, because I think there are many learning points around the countries around the globe. And finally, there is a realization that SEPA is going ahead, and the February 2014 end date has been announced. So I do expect to see corporates, have a little bit of a wake-up call around being ready for SEPA.